Hello everyone, I'm Susan May, Global Artistic Director of White Cube, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this special event with Bronwyn Katz in conversation with Zoe Whitley. This event is taking place to coincide with Bronwyn's first solo exhibition in the UK, which opened at White Cube Bermondsey this week and runs until the 27th of June. I do urge you to visit the exhibition if you're able to, as the works are even more extraordinary in person. So by way of introduction, Bronwyn Katz is a South African artist based between Cape Town and Johannesburg. She's a founding member of IKEA Collective, a network of young Black female artists based in South Africa. Bronwyn's practice, which engages with the concept of land as a repository of memory, more on which will be discussed later, incorporates sculpture, installation, video, and performance. She's participated in numerous international exhibitions, including the 2020 Sydney Biennial, the Lyon Biennial in 2019, and the solo exhibition, A Silent Line Lives Here, at the Palais de Tokyo, Paris in 2018. In October this year, her work will feature in the next New Museum Triennial in New York. Zoe Whitley is director of Chisenhale Gallery, London. She previously held curatorial positions at the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Hayward Gallery and Tate, where she co-curated the seminal exhibition Soul of a Nation in 2017. In the same year, she curated a section of the Johannesburg Art Fair, where she first encountered Bronwyn's work. In 2019, she curated the British Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and this year served as one of the judges of the Turner Prize, which opens in Coventry this September. Most recently, she was appointed as a member of the London Mayor's Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm. So before I hand over to Bronwyn and Zoe, a few housekeeping points. The talk will be around 45 minutes, and after this, we'll take some questions from the audience. So please do type your question into the chat box below, and we'll come to each of them in turn. So now over to Bronwyn and Zoe.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and I'm particularly happy to be in conversation with Bronwyn. I have so much respect for the work, and I'm really excited for us to just talk about it. The idea is that we try and do this as convivially and informally as possible. So what we'll be doing is speaking to a selection of Bronwyn's works from 2016 onward. So we'll start there, and then we'll move forward in time to the present exhibition. And I think with that said, please do feel free to put questions in the chat so that you can also be part of this conversation. The downside of our not being able to be in the same place together, in the same physical space, means that we're able to do this across time zones, and that chat function can really help us to all be in this together. So I think with that, if we move to the first slide, I thought we would start at the first work of yours that I've ever seen. And I was so taken by this work, Droom Book. And so I want to speak with you about it as a starting point for so many of the considerations that start to evolve in a lot of different ways. I think yours is a sculptural practice that has so many important comments on how we can riff and develop the idea of the found object, how we can think about histories embedded in material, and really just to create something that has such dynamic physical presence. So again, I can only echo what Susan says. Those of you on the call who are able to join and to see the work in London, please do so, because it will be very rewarding. If we move to the next slide, there's detail. And I think maybe that helps get like a little bit of the materiality that we can't otherwise have through the screen. So Bronwyn, can you talk to me a little bit about this work? Because my understanding is that it started with your finding a discarded mattress while you were still an art student.
Yeah, so the mattress works happened a year after my time as an art student. And the specific work was my first experimentation with the bed springs. Up until this point, I had been working with the foam. And the work with the foam sort of started with me looking for a solution for a separate sculpture made of bricks. And I was hoping to use the foam for the top structure so that with a stack of bricks. If it falls on somebody, it doesn't hurt anyone. And then I found this mattress that I cut up into squares. And then it didn't work as a solution for the initial sculpture, but then I had all of these pieces of foam that I had thoughtlessly cut up. So that sort of began my work with foam. And with the specific sculpture, through my work with foam, I started getting people giving me beds. And then that made me like disassemble the bed to get to the foam. And in getting to the foam, I found the spring. And with a specific work, Droomboek, I was thinking about, as the other works, about a bed as a metaphor for space, for land, for earth. And this thinking grows from teachings from my elders about space and land, and the soil being a blanket. And in this work, I was thinking of your dream space, or our dream space, as a space where we engage or connect to our ancestors, a space for communication. So Droomboek, directly translated to English, means dream book. So that was the thinking around the specific work.
I think it's wonderful to think about how all of these different forms kind of converge and create this kind of very dynamic sense of movement, kind of wall mounted, because of course you could have shown the work on the floor, but what was it that helped you think through a process of the way in which an object that we might even still recognize as a mattress could occupy space in a different way?
Can you just, like, my network is a bit bad, so there's bits of your questions that I missed. Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you were able to take something that we would think of as being floor-based, and the way you change the context of it in a way that is still so recognizably a mattress, but you turn it into this very dynamic artwork by wall mounting it. And so I was just wondering if you could walk us through some of your processes of experimenting beyond those pieces of foam within your studio practice.
In terms of the process, like I said, it would be a process of deconstruction. So like unraveling the mattress, decoiling, pulling at the springs with a specific work, and then again cutting with the foam. And I think the wall for me, I suppose, is also influenced by like my work as an artist, but also like needing a different way to look at the material. I think that like in my working with it, it stopped being a mattress and didn't have a place on the floor. And also thinking of the gaze, I wanted it to meet the body in looking, that it's not something you look down on. Even in thinking of earth as something you look down on, but it's something that sort of meets you as you stand. So that was my thinking of it being on the wall. Yeah, both influenced with like painting and drawing being on a wall, but also just thinking of what it is, a mattress, and how one can think of one's body when looking at it.
I think now we can move on to the next image. And so here we have Sandcombers, which is a slightly earlier work in Mattress and Wire. And that interest in the body comes back so strongly here because the way you've stitched the pieces of foam together with wire, to me, read very much as almost like stitches on a body. You know, like if a body's healing after some kind of injury, and these kind of surgical stitches. And so again, this is a different type of mattress material than the kind of coil. But I'm interested if you could tell us more about this work.
So this is the work that I was speaking to when I was speaking about the matches that I cut up thoughtlessly. So prior to this figuration of it, like it was in pieces, and I desperately wanted to put it back together. And in putting this work together, I thought of, at the time, I'd been thinking a lot about Greenpoint in Kimberley and the development of Greenpoint in Kimberley, but also thinking of the place that I grew up in, which in Kimberley, Greenpoint in Kimberley, but also Greenpoint in Cape Town. So Greenpoint in Kimberley is the place that I grew up in, and Greenpoint in Cape Town is being developed. And in its development, they found bodies and made the decision to exhume the bodies. And while putting this work back together, I thought of what it means to take a body out of the earth, and also my thoughtless action of cutting up this mattress that somebody had slept on and lived on. So in thinking about that space and the material, I made the decision to stitch the material back together, but also scratch at it. Also thinking about how even in death, Black and brown bodies disinherit the earth. And then also, I suppose, with the name Greenpoint Kimberley and Greenpoint Kimberley, and Greenpoint and Kimberley being the place where all of my known ancestors are buried, making it very personal, that what would it mean for somebody to remove the body of a loved one or a relative. And at the same time, I mean, this work is titled Sankombers, which means soil blanket. And earlier I spoke about this thinking of land as a bed, of soil as a blanket. So in it being my first work with foam, it really established my thinking of just what a bed is, what land is, and how our bodies are the earth and our bodies is land.
I think there's something so fascinating here about the process of transformation, because you're taking like a highly synthetic material, and then, as you were saying, this working of the surface and this scratching of the surface, the way that it makes it vulnerable, or as if you're kind of tilling the earth, all of a sudden makes it much more attuned, if you were looking at it and experiencing it, attuned to what seems like it's more organic properties, like something that could then disintegrate and go back to the earth. And so I've always been really interested since first seeing your work in your handling of material, and how you've been able to take something recognizable and through your handling of it and representation of it, take that to a new place. And that sense of a material being able to evolve and for us to be able to uncover something else within it, I think is very powerful in the work. If we go to the next slide. So here's another work, Earth. This one starts to feel much more like geometric abstraction. It seems so rectilinear, it's incredibly upright. Each of the component parts, these various seams and wedges are so even. So can you talk through or elaborate a little bit about how this construction came to be?
So this is like a found object. And my only intervention to this work was looking at how it has aged. And where I sewed was where the bed had rested on its frame and had less age. So I sewed the wire, like in terms also of just like reading this mark that was left by time. I think like with this work, there was very little that I felt it needed from me. I think the work was like most of the work was done by its occupants, by the frame it lied on, by the sun. And like I felt like the only thing that I could do was read the marks that existed on it.
And the title, Earth?
So Earth is an Afrikaans word, which means inherit. But at the same time, it's also a legal term, which could refer to a plot of land. and I mean, this work was a part of the same exhibition as San Cumbres and the previous work. So all of it was around this thinking of space, inheritance, disinheritance, what is inheritance, and also the connection between inheritance and land or earth.
This work, Stokies, is a fantastic one. So
thank you.
There are these, you see these different quilted motifs, and again, color coming into the work through that, in these kind of jeweled tones of kind of amber and this very kind of buttery golden shade of yellow, and then this kind of deep, not quite an emerald green, but certainly like a grassy green. And stokies are often referred to as like the small meat sticks, like biltong. But I wanted to know more about this type of salvaged mattress fabric and how it was then integrated into something that then starts to read in this very structured way of this kind of repetition of color and motif.
Yeah, so with this work, I like is a very dear work to me, just because I made it with my father. So my father did the metal work of this work. And like the term stokies means twigs, or like, at least in my thinking of it, refers to twigs or to wood. And like I thought of this work when I was hanging my laundry, and I was looking at the form of my laundry rack. And like the fact that like the one edge looked like a pillow and the other edge too. And in thinking of stokies, thinking of wood and of a coffin. So like this thinking was still with the same thinking as the foam works, like thinking about death and the earth and land. So like my thinking of this was like a type of coffin, a very delicate, soft coffin. So that's why stokies, which is a twig and not thought of as wood. Yeah, that was my thinking of this work.
Yeah, there's a softness that comes into the practice in a work like this. And so it's interesting to think about it in relation to death and grief, or a process of burial, and thinking also about how this salvaged mattress fabric can take on a doubling for the type of lining you might find in a coffin or something like that. So this thing that is designed to kind of provide some comfort or cradling for the body. But it is, I think that if we just go back for a moment, because I think it's from that, or can we go back one more? Right, I think there's something about that angle where we're able to see and appreciate this, the structure you're saying that your father made, and that there is multidimensionality within the work as well. There's always these various planes where the wall-based works meet the wall, but then also comes out from it. And I'm not sure that people would have been able to get a sense of the interplay between the two without an image such as this. So that's why I wanted to include it. We can go on to the next one now. Similar thing here with this angle. I'll need you to pronounce the title for this one because I will get it completely wrong.
Kubai Urikwaho.
And what does the title refer to?
So the title translated means Goodbye Mountain of the Sea, which is the initial name, or the real name of Cape Town. So I mean, I made this work when I decided to leave Cape Town. So it was like a letter to Cape Town saying goodbye.
If we move on to the next slide, then we can see it front on. So we've gotten a sense of its kind of depth and dimensionality, and then you see it here as this kind of series of kind of slightly meeting and then slightly diverging parallel lines kind of strung across this surface. And this is, I think it's at this point in your work that I really started to think about how your use of metal and metal as a form of mark making and as a form of line almost started to take on a form like a musical notation or a score. So it's interesting to hear you talk about this as if it were, you know, a goodbye letter.
Yeah, I think with around the time I was making this work, I was also thinking of sort of using the material to signify like a place at the same time. As like, maybe I'll speak about this when we get to other works, like when thinking of like these very minimal gestures as like an outline for a place, or my own type of map making of a place as well. So it's a letter, but it's also like a map. Yeah.
And I think that's a fascinating way to think about it, because there's something about the way you play with line and introduce a kind of a playfulness or this kind of sense of harmony that often starts to breach boundaries. And even as they come back in, they're never contained by the limits of the frame or the boundaries that you set up. Maybe we can move to the next. So again, with Greenside, this is a wonderful one because I feel like there's such a sense of you establishing a syntax or a language. And it's like, we've got these building blocks and then you start to play with them and order them in different ways to create this statement on the wall.
Yeah, I think so. Greenside, I think, like I was saying with Uri Kwaho, was like a way of, yeah, was a way of trying to map out a place. So Greenside is a place that I'm familiar with. It's very, very close to the place that I grew up. It's like the neighbor of the place that I grew up in. And like, I think at this time also I was thinking of trying to outline a place using the metal. Also thinking of borders and boundaries, and that they made up, and that I can also make up a border for a place with my materials. Yeah.
So now if we move to the next one. So with a work like this one is floor-based. So there's, again, so this is part of a series, untitled, but then subtitled Notes on Perception. So there appears to be a shift in the way you're perceiving the possibilities of metal and the way that it can occupy three-dimensional space.
Yeah. So these works were part of a show that I had at the Parade Tokyo, and oftentimes the work is influenced by where I am. And I think this was the first time that I had been outside of the country for a long period, and I felt a type of unraveling, but also like realizing how I'm perceived as somebody from the African continent. But also at the same time being aware of people from the continent in the space and how they are perceived as well. And also previous perception of the space having ever been there. So I think with work like this and the other untitled works, I think there's an attempt to map, but a difficulty in mapping what's new. So they are more bent, and like there is an unraveling that accompanies them as well.
If we move to the next one. So this exhibition at the exhibition at the Palais de Tokyo was curated by Marianne Yemsi. And so here we have another of the work, this one in wire and rope, and these wall mounted. So this one I've always read as a triptych. So as one work, but in 3 component parts. And so it's interesting to hear in relation to the previous floor-based unraveling, the attempts at what starts to feel here like the start of a weaving together.
Can you repeat that last bit, Zoe?
Yeah, there seems to be like a progression from something that is seemingly kind of wholly unraveled, but then if one reads it from left to right, there starts to be a coming together by the time you get to the third in the triptych. And so this one I find quite inscrutable, but really fascinating, because I've been interested in how the rope and these component parts start to knit it together as you move through this sequence. I feel like there's a real journey that the material is taking us on.
That's really interesting, because I think the last one that is more whole is more the way that I find the material. So as it progresses to the left, it's how I've unraveled it more. So generally I would find this material connected and whole, put together. So I mean, it reads in an opposite way in that the process is. So your thought is interesting in that sense.
And that's fascinating to me, to then now go back and look at it and think about what it means to read it from right to left and to experiencing it in this different way. I think maybe we can move on to the next one. So with Chateau Vert, then you have not only a floor-based work, but one that is really starting to kind of intrude into the space and to affect the way that we as the viewer can move around the space.
Yeah, I also think that this work divides space quite effectively as well. And this work was inspired by, well, not inspired by, but like I sort of took the form from fences that are made out of bed springs. So the place that I grew up in, again, Greenpoint, a lot of times bed springs are recycled to make fences or to sort of pot space for people's yards. And yeah, it seemed fitting to use this type of motive for this exhibition. The exhibition was titled "A Silent Line Lives Here," and I was also thinking about not only differences in my context, in this new context, but like also similarities in how space is divided, and who lives where and how people live. But the title "Silence" was also in thinking of like how differently I felt that we speak about violence in South Africa, and versus how violence is spoken about in France. From my perspective, I felt that it's impolite to speak about certain violences in France, where, like, for example, race we talk about all the time in South Africa, whereas in France, like, you need to be very careful about how you speak about race. So yeah, I sort of went off topic, but with this, I was also just thinking of dividing space and speaking about lines and demarcating. Yeah.
I don't think you've gone off topic at all. I think you've just given us a real window into this work. And because I was thinking about it being a moment of transition, even in terms of your having titled it in French. And I couldn't help but then also think of like what we think of as areas of Paris that are populated by Black and brown French people, like Chateau Rouge. So I didn't know I was interested in the interplay of language and thinking about space and demarcations of segregated space that might not be even physically demarcated, but that are socially demarcated. Like, at what point on, the metro does one not go another stop, and one area is here, or how do we define which spaces we feel comfortable in or are told you can't go beyond? So all of those things felt embedded in the work. So to hear you speak about that as these kind of cultural translations, I think is incredibly illuminating. I think we can go to the next slide. So this one may feel like a departure for some people. And what I really wanted to hear from you. I know you've written and spoken about it elsewhere, but is this use of steel wool or wire wool in creating this work. But also I think we may have a video clip so that we're able to hear the audio. Nope.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the video clip is of, okay.
The video clip is of another work, but that provides a related sense of the ambiance in the space.
Mm.
So I think let's talk about that interplay of sound and material.
Yeah, so this work had its own sound, but I just didn't have a video of the work and the sound. But it was a part of the same exhibition as the work we just saw. The title of the exhibition was, and I'd been thinking about language all the time, but also just language and land, and the erasure of language as well. And previous ideas of language that was reflected in my work had more to do with my relationship with Afrikaans, the history of Afrikaans and the parts of the histories of Afrikaans that is erased, like the origin of Afrikaans being a Creole language that was formed by indigenous and enslaved people who were forced to speak Dutch. And then that history sort of being erased so that settlers at the time who wanted their independence from the Dutch could identify as Afrikaners. So at the time, before this work, I was more interested in Afrikaans, but in thinking more about language, I began to think about my own lost ancestral language, and also how that connects to the earth. And with this work, I really wanted to create a type of forest using this material. So the first time I used this material was when I was speaking about Afrikaans and the uncomfortability of speaking Afrikaans in my body because of how Afrikaans was co-opted by the apartheid regime. And I used steel wool because of its coarseness, its harshness, and thinking of how it might feel on the skin. And then in me wanting for this exhibition, wanting to create a new exhibition, not an exhibition, a new language, I wanted to bring that into my new language, that feeling of uncomfortability. So for the sound that I made for this specific piece, I used the steel wool and metal. I also used the voice, for the sound of the other work that we saw in the video. I was more interested in working with the click consonants. So something that I neglected to say now was that for the language as well, that my made-up language, or my Creole language that I was forming with this exhibition, was that I intended for the work and the sound to be read through hearing, but also that these were objects that you can touch. So like an understanding of the language involves touch, seeing, and hearing sound. And then, yeah, with the other sculpture, I looked at the 4 click consonants that are part of my ancestral language, but also other Southern African click languages. And also just thinking of how the decision to signify these click consonants were made, like a slash, a double slash, and like these decisions were made by Western linguists, you know. And then, yeah, also wanting to create my own motive to signify a click. and also just with the sound contributing to what the click is with my material.
I think that really already from 2016 to 2019, there's such a sense of how your sense of working through material can be this multisensory experience, because you start with this, the softness of foam and, you know, this kind of the hard line of metal, and then to bring us here to this abrasive material, but then to be evoking this forest, and again, volleying between a man-made material, or certainly a kind of heavily manipulated material that's then commercially available, and then to transform it back into something that evokes a kind of a natural state. I just couldn't help thinking about that being one of the things that I think really roots people to the space, to commune with the objects, because there's such a sense of being brought into an encounter with something that is simultaneously familiar or recognizable, but then that has to be kind of felt and intuited rather than kind of you know, read about, or something that's purely cerebral. You're able to take us on a journey that aesthetically is highly conceptual, but then without ever abandoning the fact that there's also this kind of deeply felt bodily relation to it. And so I wish we could be in the room with this work right now. If we go to the next one. Oh, do you mind if we listen one more time? I think after hearing Bronwyn speak about it in such detail, it brings something to it to hear it again. Okay. And that brings us on to the works that are included in your current exhibition. And so with something like this, in some ways I'm brought back to the use of color that we first saw, or at least within the context of this very brief run through of your many, many works, of thinking about the interplay of color and softness within the sculptures. So with this body of work, there's something celestial, you know, star is in the title of the exhibition. So are we to understand that there's a movement from the earth and from the ground kind of skyward?
Oh, sorry, just repeat the last part again, sorry.
Kind of movement between, we've moved from the earth potentially to the heavens, but I don't want to overinterpret. So I just wanted to hear more from you.
Yeah, so for the title of the show, like I took the title of the show from I was watching a video on YouTube, and there was a traditional healer speaking about the fact that he can turn himself into a star and visit his loved ones in the sky. And I think while I was making this work, I had lost a few loved ones, so that really stayed with me. But also in I think something that I neglected to say with this Potsdam works previously was that I mean, culturally in South Africa, I don't know about other places, often the Potsdam was used as a signifier of race. So somebody could say, you have hair that you could scrub the pots with. So also in my use of pot scours, like I think it serves as a signifier of race as well. And with this body of work, I was thinking, I really wanted to speak about the fact, coming from a people that like we always told that like we never named, like there were no names for things before colonization, and we never thought of the stars. It felt important for like these works that were about the sky to use Torah titles, just also to speak about how, or to think about how my people thought of the stars. And I mean, what was interesting with discovering Torah words for stars was its connection to land and animals, that like what's above us is not so different, or the thinking that what's above us is not so different from what exists, and at the same time it makes sense that we are able to turn ourselves into stars and visit our loved ones in the sky because we made of the same matter. So yeah.
That's beautiful. And here we have one of the details. We're starting to get questions in the chat. So if I can read some of them out to you and just say if you can hear me or need me to delay it. The first question is, I think you mentioned the understanding of language involving touch. Can you expand on that? Do you mean, for example, language as a musical instrument?
That wasn't my intention. I didn't really think of language as a musical. I think most of the time when I think of language, I think of the voice. And I think with this work, for the show, I can turn myself into a star with works in my 2019 exhibition about language. I think what I'm trying to do is give voice. So it has less to do with a muse. I don't mind that thinking or that connection, but I think it has less to do with a musical instrument. My use of language is about giving voice. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have another question here, and it's going to lead to me making a little disclosure, but it's not me writing this question. I admire you greatly. Your work is conceptually complex and incredible. Congratulations on the current show. Hoping you win the future prize. So I think that refers to the Future Generation Art Prize. So I should say, just so that everything is clear, that I was on the selection committee for that prize, but it was a group decision about who would be on the short list. So this person would like to ask, I would like to know whether the Black Lives Matter and Me Too movement has impacted the dynamics of your practice, and if yes, how?
Definitely, just in terms of the fact that I'm a Black person and I live in a female body or a woman body. I suppose, like in conscious and in subconscious ways, I don't directly refer to the Black Lives Movement or Me Too movement in my speaking of the work, but I think my work on my experience as a Black woman of color shows in my work, not necessarily like in a very literal way that a figure would, but I think in my use of materials, an easy example would be the use of the pot scour that is connected to like a negative way of thinking about Black women's hair. So I think like in subtle ways, yes, but never in a way that's very visible in the work.
Maybe this is a good moment, especially since Susan mentioned IKEA and your being a founding member, to say more to our participants in today's chat about your involvement with IKEA Collective.
Yeah, so IKEA is a collective of 11 Black women. We all went to university together, and yeah, and we're all independent artists as well. And we came together to give each other's voices strength. we felt that within the institution and like Black women voices were quiet or silenced or invisible. And we believed that if we come together, we would give each other's voices power and make each other significant. So that was the thinking around IKEA.
Thank you for that. Another question that's come through in the chat is, do you see the works as a way of salvaging what in some ways might otherwise have been lost? The loss of materials, the loss of land or territory, the loss of cultural heritage.
My thinking of loss is that like loss presents us with opportunity to create something new. And in my work with the materials, generally, I'm not always trying to make the material whole. I read what it already exists, and where there's a bend, I bend. Where there's broken, I often break more. Sometimes I mend. So I think the work with found material, like there is something about salvaging, definitely, but not salvaging to make whole, but salvaging to add to the life of the material, to contribute, to create something new.
Thank you for that. I see in the works very much this kind of, they're on this journey, something that we might think of as their own kind of material migration, that they've started someplace, and then through your work and through your conceptualizations, they end up somewhere else. Another question has come through. Oh, it's from Marianne. Hi, Marianne. Thank you for joining. Does the physical commitment that your work requires have a symbolic meaning?
Hi, Marianne. I think what I want to, I just realized that what I didn't answer with the previous question relating to territory. Like I think I forgot to speak to that aspect. I only spoke about the materials, and I think in terms of territory, with trying to create something new or using what already exists. Like I think. In terms of territory, I think that what I think needs to be salvaged is the thinking that like land is owned, and oftentimes I look to previous thoughts with that I'd learned from my maternal grandmother and other elders in my community, and the thinking is that land is not owned, the land owns us. So just in terms of salvaging land and material and how that connects to territory, I just wanted to just talk about that because I didn't say anything about that. And then with Marianne's question, time is very important to the work. And like labor as well. I often, like when I was working with Marianne, there were many people involved in the process because it takes a lot of time. So we need many hands. And I think it's also important to give the work time, just to also create an aura. So repetition is important, and spending a lot of time with the materials is important. And also working with others and like allowing them to contribute to the making of the work.
Thank you. Another question has now come into the chat. And as we're going through these questions, there's also images from the current body of work that you can see in the exhibition. But someone has asked about the future. So which are your future projects?
Future in terms of like making? What am I thinking of making?
I will see if we have
or future in terms of
elaboration. Don't know. I read it out verbatim.
sorry, Zoe. Like, I don't know.
I'm going to do my best. So
yeah.
yeah, are there, maybe you can, I don't know if there's anything you're able to say about, say, the new museum triennial or forthcoming projects. Oh, there's another, I'll see if it's been elaborated. Slightly different questions. So yeah, we'll go with that kind of future projects that you're working on.
Yeah, so for the new museum, the work that I'm creating draws on a previous video work that I made, where I look at a rock engraving site called Driekopseiland. That's 40 minutes outside of Kimberley. And Driekopseiland is at a river, and on the riverbed, there exists a lot of marks that is oftentimes, in times of a lot of rain, the marks are covered by the water of the river, and in times of drought, more of the marks are exposed. And so the work that I'm creating for the new museum sort of takes from their thinking. Also I'm thinking of creating objects that are praise for rain or asking for rain, thinking of rain as disruption or shifts or change. Yeah.
Wonderful. And this may well be our last question, but beautifully comes full circle back to the exhibition here in London. I just saw the show, congratulations, and I was really taken by the sculptural drawings. Could we please hear a little bit more about how these came about? One of the large pieces felt almost like a portal, an invitation to step into some other space. Thank you.
Sorry, Zoe. Did you? I think I missed something.
I can read the question out again. It's a question and a comment. So the comment aspect was to congratulate you on the exhibition and to say how taken the inquirer is with the sculptural drawings. And so could we please hear a little bit more about how these came about? One of the large pieces felt almost like a portal, an invitation to step into some other space. Thank you.
I think I spoke on this earlier, just in speaking about the fact that I'd been looking at the Torah titles, thinking of like personal loss of loved ones, and also thinking about the statement that I heard from the video that I watched about being able to turn oneself into a star. So I welcome the fact that that work made the person feel like a portal. I think part of the intention. And I think in terms of the forms of the work, there are forms that have continued from previous works, trying to outline spaces. And I think in similar ways, like those line works can speak of an outline of a constellation, the same way it can speak about an outline in the earth, or borders in the earth.
Wonderful. And I do, in the interest of time and keeping this to the hour, thank you everyone for being so engaged and having so many questions. This is the final question now. So we'll kind of close the Q&A room after this. Hi, Bronwyn. In your video work, you use your body, movement, and often Afrikaans. Do you feel that the video work is in a way an extension of you dealing with the body and territory in earlier work?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. They were, I mean, the first video that I made was titled Grondherinnering, which means soil memory. And with that work, I wash my feet in earth, and I wear a dress that I stained in earth. Earth from the place that I'm from, and like the gestures that I made in the video by washing my feet with the soil and by wearing this soil stained dress was remind me of the place that I originate from, but also just to give me strength. So bathing myself in the earth just to like make me feel strong as well. Yeah, and then in another work, Wese Groet, I also have earth, and I perform a series of gestures as a way of protest. And the earth is there as well as a support. When I was creating the video, I didn't want to be alone in the video, and I felt that by introducing the soil, I would be accompanied by my ancestors in that video.
Bronwyn, before I hand back over to Susan, I would just like to thank you for giving so much of your time and conveying so much of the depth and insight of your practice, because I've learned so much today and I really, really enjoyed it. And so again, please do go and see the exhibition, because it's a triumph and it's very exciting to have the work in the city that I'm in. So I'm very selfishly delighted, but you've given a gift to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you for your questions and for how kindly you asked them. It's been really nice to talk to you.
And I'd like to thank you both. This has been a fascinating, illuminating conversation. It's given a really great insight into the practice. So thank you, Zoe, for your brilliant questions, and Bronwyn. And thank goodness the Wi-Fi held up. And congratulations again, Bronwyn, on the exhibition. I just want to remind you all that the exhibition continues at White Cube Bermondsey until the 27th of June, if you do get a chance to visit. And in the meantime, thank you all for joining us, and goodbye.